Like I tell people just to equalize the situation, right? I remember my mom would tell me, Jerry, just don't date black people. Like it's just not worth the headache.
This is the Living Numbers Podcast, and this is the place where everyone's interesting if you ask the right questions. I am your host, Tony Rambles, and I have a wonderful guest here for you all today. So, Jerry's going to correct me if I'm wrong on any of this information. So we'll just roll. This is based on all of my wonderful findings and research. Here we go. Hailing from Knoxville, Tennessee, he earned his biology degree at Rice University, actually just down the street from me. He also attended pharmacy school at the University of Tennessee in Memphis. He's been teaching leadership workshops since 2012, which inspired him to become a pharmacy manager. He then took it a step further and completed the Coach Rice Leadership Certificate Program in the spring of 2020. Then he founded Adapting Leaders. That is his company, his website, which we'll talk about later. He did this to give clients clarity, confidence, and closure when facing difficult situations. His interests include travel, cooking, playing guitar or piano, and lots of salsa dancing. Skilled listener, great adjuster, and challenge acceptor. I present the Jerry Fu, also known as J Fu. Say hello to the people.
Hello to the people.
Very fun stuff. Was there anything that I missed or that I kind of skipped over a little bit there?
No, you did great. The only thing to clarify is that I had started in pharmacy school becoming a pharmacy manager. So it was like I was already in pharmacy when I, took the leadership course and then that's just because people are like, why did he go from leadership coaching to a pharmacy manager? So just wanted to clarify that. But everything else was spot on. Thank you so much.
Excellent. So we're going to start here with our first number, and I'm going to tell a little story. I'm a high school teacher, and our first number here is 63%.
Okay.
And I think we all know that is not passing.
Yeah.
Not a good enough grade there. And oftentimes, like, we just look at these grades, right? But there's always like a story, like behind these grades that we get, whether we worked hard or we didn't work at all, or sometimes situations happen where you might have a student that's awesome, but they didn't pass, but you didn't know that there were things going on at home, right? Somebody may have passed away. They were depressed. There's a myriad of issues, right?
Yeah.
But your reputation helps you stand your ground, because a lot of times with teachers, if someone doesn't pass, the question is why? Why didn't they pass? What did you do or what didn't you do to help that student, right? That's typically the question, especially, I can only speak from my experience, that's high school. So that's 9 to 12. And we're talking about kids who should know better, who should understand how these things work, right? You've been in school for a while. But as you start to explain yourself as a teacher, the one thing that really helps you is your reputation. So people will then stick up for you if you have built this solid foundation of being a teacher that helps kids, that makes sure you put the kids first, and that you do everything that you can, right? So sometimes, right, they'll pull you on the carpet. You called into the office and the boss wants to know, hey, what's going on? And you give them your story. And I can't be specific, obviously, but I know I've put the processes in place to help me stand my ground if these things were to happen. So I say all that to say, Jerry, as an Asian American growing up, and your expertise now is in conflict resolution and doing things like being able to stand your ground and work through these situations, what did conflict look like for you growing up as an Asian American and having parents that came over here from Taiwan, correct?
Yeah, good job. Yeah.
Yeah. So what did that look like for you? Because I know it was very different. I can speak like for minorities,
Mhm.
conflict is a little bit different. We got to think about different things. So go ahead and share some insight there from your childhood.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I remember when, I was preparing for swim lessons and, in the locker shower when white kid starts going, I know Kung Fu. And he starts striking me, making
Oh
mocking
no.
like kicks towards me and stuff. And then, other people, they talk slowly to me as if somehow I can't understand English. They're like, are you sure? Did you understand what I'm saying? And or they mock the accent because they can't speak English. Or I remember on the playground when this one girl like didn't like having to share part of the playground. So she's like, go back to Japan where you belong. It's like, I was born here. I'm an American citizen. What are you doing? And I'm not
This
even
can be the
Japanese.
worst, right?
Yeah, there are times when it's wonderful, and then there's times when it's terrible. Yes. Yeah. So these are the things, and my family, again, just the nature of just tough it out. Hey, look, it's not worth picking this fight. We're just going to build this nice life for ourselves and just tread on as few tripwires as we can. If you're not in a position to fight back, don't do it. And there's times when it is appropriate just to say, hey, you know what? This person has knives and guns possibly, and I really just don't want to provoke anything worse, right? But
Right.
other times it is, yeah, there are times when you're in a position to speak up and you're like, why didn't I? Or, that witty comeback, shows up 6 hours later. You're like, why wasn't I ready for this? Oh, that would have been so good. So, I'll share another example. After we originally from Wisconsin, moved down to Tennessee. And I remember there was one after school afternoons, some friends of mine and I are playing hacky sack, we're just kicking this around. And, some of the teachers don't like this. And so if you do it during school hours, they'll confiscate it. But after hours, right, no big deal, or at least so we thought. Then, these two older white teachers come up to us as if they were going to confiscate it. And we're just trying to plead our case. We're, this after school, why does it matter? We're not causing any problems. I happen to be wearing a t-shirt with some Japanese artwork of two sumo wrestlers sparring. So, right. So their garb is very, very revealing, and one of them notices my shirt, turns to the other, kind of tugs at it. She goes, can you believe you would wear this like in school? And I said, what's the problem? It's an ancient Japanese tradition. The other says, well, turn your Japanese tradition inside out. And they both laugh and walk off. So this is the kind of thing I'm dealing with, right? And
That's
again,
terrible.
I'm not like, oh, I'm just this horrible victim of this. On one hand, yeah, I could have gone to the principal. I could have, if I had been more resourceful as a freshman in high school, right? That's just skinny build, try not to get picked on because I'm already getting picked on, right? And yeah, so these are the things that you have to kind of fight through.
So how old were you when that happened?
I was like 14 or 15.
What kind of effect did that have on you when looking at people like teachers, authority figures,
Mm-hmm.
and just hearing that kind of stuff? Like, did that change how you felt about, teachers or bosses? Or because I know it's a different dynamic and you're supposed to listen to these people, you're supposed to respect them, but then to hear them turn it around and say something like they're supposed to be the responsible people, and here they go, saying the same things that the kids would say. How did that affect you?
I mean, for a kid who is conflict averse, right? You just get mad at the fact that you're just mad, you're ashamed of whatever caused the stress, right? So it wasn't like, oh, well, I don't like them, but I also don't like the fact that there are parts of my identity which are just an easy target for mockery or condescension. And for a kid who's just struggling to belong, where you're too American for your Taiwanese relatives because your Mandarin isn't good enough, and then you don't fit in here because all the racial disparities. And the blessing in disguise is that now there's so many of us. There's a great book called Third Culture Kids that kind of details this phenomenon where you meet people that spend time in Argentina and Singapore, and then they end up in the US and they're like, nobody is aware of world politics. Nobody's aware of the other things going on globally. And where do I belong? And then, technology comes along and connects all these people so, great that the people who don't belong finally found belonging. But yeah, I mean, it is just in those moments, you're just asking for help. Say, how do I navigate this, right? How do I engage these teachers that clearly I'm supposed to respect, but I'm not going to condone, their blind spots, their subconscious as a human being that clearly keeps coming out in ugly ways.
Yeah, you go, this is bull crap. Okay, but I can't like go around punching people. I can't hit adults. I'm taught to be respectful. So like, where is my my sense of protection? Who's going to help me? So did you have someone back then that would champion you in these situations? Not just say, oh, it's going to be okay, but is there someone that fought for you one time or two that you can think back to and like, man, that person really had my back and I needed it at that time?
Not in high school, unfortunately. And sometimes that's just the hard truth, right? I mean, at some point, ideally people get to a point where they realize, you know what, it's not worth hanging on to this resentment. All I can do now is move forward and pay the way forward to say, okay, how do I turn around and help other people who may encounter this? Let's talk about how we can move forward with this together so that when another situation comes in, we'll be more prepared for it, right? Because forgiveness, believe me, you don't know how to forgive until you've received forgiveness. Like, in a situation where you receive to say, oh, because I'll be happy. Like I tell people just to equalize the situation, right? I remember my mom would tell me, Jerry, just don't date Black people. Like, it's just not worth the headache, right? She would say that. And so there's this, well, because they, in their minds, right, they're like, oh, Black people are threatening and you don't want to be threatened. And I don't get me wrong, like I remember where I was an incident where a Black person said some very disparaging racial things to me. So I mean, it's bad enough when like white people are doing it. It's another when like other minorities are doing it, and you're just like, okay, this isn't great. When we're so it is hard because you fall into stereotypes because you pattern them after what your parents think, and it's like, oh, okay, let's back up for a second and say, okay, how do we do this better, and how do I make sure I don't fall into the same traps?
So when did it start to turn around? When did you go, okay, wait a second, I've had all these experiences and I've learned all these different lessons. So how can I now kind of push this narrative a different way and really teach people, both educate the people who are not making this disparaging remarks and saying these hurtful things, and teach the person that has been on the other side of it, like yourself, to go, okay, wait, you don't have to give these people the power, and you can now turn your mindset to shift and be able to grow from it. So where did the turn happen for you? Was it in a specific experience? Was there an aha moment?
Yeah. I think when I think the first time I really the first step was finding a place where I belong. And at one point I joined this fellowship called Oasis Medical, and I met for the first time in Houston, because when I moved back to Houston 12 years ago, I went to like this church that was dominated by white Aggies. There was like a section of international people within there, but it took some digging to actually find them. And then I jump into this medical fellowship that is very international, started by a Syrian doctor. And all of a sudden you're seeing all these people, all these different languages and all these different cultural crossing, pollination, things like that. And you realize, oh, wow, it just started to become a lot more fascinating. And that is when you realize that this is something I don't have to be ashamed of, and that is something I can share and celebrate with people. Now you have that confidence to say, hey, let me take you to Chinatown and show you all my favorite stuff to eat. Let's have some fun at the karaoke bar, because we all know, there's stereotypes there, but it's fun. Like, check it out for yourself, right? Immerse them in what makes you excited about your culture. Like, I'm amazed at how many like football players, will do cosplay at like anime conferences now. And like before it's just like, oh, you like anime, that's so weird. And now like, well, these big linebackers like it too, and no one makes fun of them for it. So what happened, right? And then once you get comfortable with yourself, right, I think that's when you start to say, oh, and I'm at an age where thankfully I don't have teachers above me that I'm not afraid to stand up to or things like that now, because we're adults, we can challenge each other. So this is the transformation that we're trying to get to, right? And so the specific conversation I had about racial tension happened at a networking event in Houston about this time last year, around the Asian hate crimes. Anyway, so I meet this older white gentleman there, and he asked me, he goes, hey, so these Asian hate crimes, like, is it really that big a deal? Like, have you experienced anything? And I had to, on one hand, it's like, okay, on one hand, there is some merit that maybe the media is playing this up because it's for ratings. But, in my mind, I'm like, people are dying, dude. Like, this is, no, it's not okay.
I mean, but it's almost like, okay, you got to respect the guy for asking and inquiring. Because, before it'd be like, they wouldn't care. And you witnessed it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you're like, okay, the packaging isn't great, but he opened the discussion up. So continue.
No. And so this is, I hope people have more moments to celebrate this. And I'm not saying this to, pat myself on the back. I'm just trying to share this experience so that other people can be inspired by it and have their own. Because basically what happened was this. I said, all right, we'll call him Tim. I'm like, all right, Tim, thanks for asking that, because it is, people, I'm glad you're curious and you're willing to stretch into uncomfortable territory, especially, being white. I asked him, I was like, okay, Tim, can I share something with you? Yeah, sure. So, did you know that Houston's Chinatown is built on discrimination? What do you mean by that? I said, well, at one point, all the city officials saw these Asians as a threat. So they sequestered them in the southwest part of the city. And then even worse, they divide up their district in such a way, they draw it up in such a way that they can't even concentrate all their people into one vote. He goes, oh, that doesn't sound good. I was like, no, it's not. And so have I experienced any, disparaging remarks of physical violence because of this whole like hate crime thing? I'm like, no, and I'm thankful. And there's a bigger system of discrimination that is not okay just because people aren't being directly assaulted. Yeah. And, I'm like, oh, I showed him. I'm just like, let me just stretch him just for a second and use this as a, let me just humbly show some information that he may or may not like, but it'll be good for him. And whether he says, wow, that maybe I need to look into this and maybe I can be more of an advocate, great. If it's just, hey, that was kind of fun and I'm just going to go back to my default, it's his choice. He's an adult. Like I can't make people change at the end of the day. So, moments like this where people say, hey, yeah, I want to have that voice too when, I see something and you want to be able to say, oh, what do you mean by that? Well, no, I was just trying to, I was just kind of making a joke. I'm just like, no, like, let's unpack this, right? I want to be curious, and at the same time, I'm not going to let you off the hook because these are the kind of careless things that normally, right, just kind of slide under that conflict averse people be like, oh, you know what, the benefit of the doubt, and it's just like, no, now you're just being passive, right? So maybe there's a better way.
No, yeah, screw that, Jerry. You gotta ask the questions, man. Unpack it. And I'm one of those kind of people too, because a lot of times people just say stuff. They haven't even thought it out. They heard it from a friend or they heard it from a parent, someone in their family. And sometimes it sounds good to them, at least to that person. Yeah. But there's no merit behind it at all. And so you get these people, I'm pretty sure we have those blind spots too, where just, we just say it. Yeah. And then when somebody calls you on it, you go, I don't know. I don't necessarily have a real answer for you. So I implore you, I encourage you to continue to do that, Jerry, and I'm sure you know this with your expertise, it's not about necessarily calling people out or being disrespectful or putting them on the spots per se, but it's to challenge the idea that they have in their head around whatever it is that they just said. If you're going to say it, make sure you can back it up and know why you're saying it. Don't just say stuff. And as a teacher, and I teach basically language and communication, I'm a speech teacher. Nice. The words that people say, the phrases, I'm like, okay, I'm always listening to those things very specifically. Like, okay, well, you said this. Is that what you mean? And then sometimes they'll go, well, I don't know. That's okay. But keep digging, keep digging to find it. So awesome. This is amazing. So many things coming to mind, but we're going to jump to our next number. And so we're going to dig a little bit more into your expertise with conflict resolution. So our next number is 5 a.m. I had this flight. I want to say about a month or so ago, something like that. And this airline, they didn't actually open up until I want to say like 4:30, but it was a flight at like 5:30. Oh, yeah. And you got to get there 2 hours before at the minimum. And so them not opening up until an hour before, it's really putting everybody in an uneasy spot. And you could tell everybody's lined up. There's no signage. Nobody knows what's going on. And I'm talking about is a long line of people, right?
Yeah.
And we, my wife and I, and my son, that's 1 year old, are at the front. And so as people come in, you know, it's societal. You see it, and then people, you see people in line, you go to the back of the line, you just get in line, right? If there's nowhere else to go. And so you have people coming in and they're kind of just jumping the line. They're kind of doing whatever they want to do. It's like, hey, wait a second. If something starts to happen, like they need to come to the front of this line first. Like you can't just go and just do whatever you want to. We all been here since 3:30 trying to figure this thing out, right? There's no signage. It's super annoying. But I saw in that situation that people can be amicable. They can be awesome, right? You could just come in, you go, okay, nothing's open yet. A line has started. Let me just get in line. Excellent, cool. Everybody wins. You find your place in the circle of life at this point, right? But once one person bucks the system and goes haywire and starts to do whatever they want, anarchy ensues. And so I found myself at one point saying, hey, there's a line for a reason. You know, I didn't want these people to just come in 10 minutes ago and now they get the service first.
Yeah.
When all of us have been there for a while. So I take the long way, right? To get to this question here is, what do you look for before giving out strategies to resolve conflict? So as I'm telling my story, for example, what were the things that you were trying to listen for before you can diagnose the situation and then start to give strategies?
I was like chomping at the bit when you had this, because I was like, oh, you're gonna love this. Ask yourself, what is the story I'm telling myself about this situation? And what do I need to evaluate, right? Because I'll give a counter example. Also, airport waiting line, right? People are waiting in line, backed up, you know, things like that. And you see this one lady just, excuse me, I have to get to the front, and people are like letting her go. And, you know, you can see the frustration, right? People be like, why is she cutting this line? Why is she? Because there's a time and place to break social norms. Usually as a courtesy, we don't. And there's a fun dynamic we can unpack in a sequel episode or whatever. But so finally, right as she's about to like get, you know, halfway there, and she's clearly in a rush and it has her. And then finally, this one guy finally has the courage to actually like stop her and say, look, lady, like we've been waiting here a while too. What gives you the right to cut? And like, you know, basically it feels disrespectful. And she goes, I just found out my son shot himself in the head and I'm trying to get there while he's still alive.
Okay, you go ahead.
And then there's like Red Sea's part, right? And so all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, you know, I thought this lady's just being rude, right? And had you just taken the curiosity to say, hey lady, you seem like you're in a real rush. Like, can you tell me what's going on? Oh yeah, you know, my son shot himself in the head, and you know that. Oh well, yeah, of course. Like anyone would understand. Please go, right? And you didn't have to go through the high peak of embarrassment to like come back down and need some humble pie, right? It could have just been, let me just take a closer look at this. Say, hey, like, just to ask you, wow, like you seem like you're in a rush. You're cutting the line. Can you tell me what's going on? Like, what's so urgent that you need to cut this line? And that way you can get some more information. And if you don't like their answer, okay, hey man, look, like I understand you're in a rush. We're all in a rush. That's not urgent. I don't think that's urgent enough.
I'm hungry too.
This. Yeah, right. And so, you know, again, I'm not here to take away from the fact that maybe sometimes that's what people have to do to learn that lesson, right? And maybe all of us have been through enough situations where, hey, you know what? Let me share some of this so that when you come across a similar situation, you can kind of sidestep some of the like skinned knees and, you know, tripping up that I went through, and, you know, you can move on to like more important things. So you don't have to have that guilt and go through all that deprogramming. Be like, okay, I'm not going to do that again. Oh, I can't believe it. So things like that, right? So no, I love that question, because I was gonna say, oh yeah, he's going to love this example.
It is good because most times we don't have the backstory. Like we don't have all of the information. We're not able to even get that information. And so, like you said, you have to ask yourself, okay, what am I going to get from this? Okay, what do I hope to accomplish if I am going to step up and say something? And I use this when I'm thinking about issues, maybe in class, also with my wife, which I'm so thankful that we rarely have issues. But when something
Good.
does come up, usually it's my fault, number one. And
Welcome to that world. Yeah.
number two is, okay, is it me? Like, am I the one tripping? Let me do some self-evaluation
Mhm.
first. And if you come to the conclusion that, okay, it's not me, it is something that this other person done, this student done, or my wife has done. Now, okay, how do I go about this? Right? Because in school, I'm always thinking de-escalate, de-escalate, de-escalate. You do
Yeah.
not want to ramp it up with the
Mhm.
kids, because
Yeah.
now if one kid starts going crazy, now the class is looking at you. Now this thing can get out of hand. Who knows what their buddy is going to start doing? And so it's always de-escalate. We got to bring this thing down. And so I remember a time where I was it was in between classes, and the bell had rang, and these kids were like still kind of just hanging out in the hallway, probably making TikToks or whatever. And I think I say something like, "Hey, let's get to class," some generic, thing that all the teachers say. And man, I forgot what they said. But man, it took me from 0 to 100, and that's honestly really rare for me. But I said, "Hey, what did you say?" I really felt like my dad when I said that too. What did you say? So I went around the corner and I escalated the situation in this instance. And so it was a big thing. The kids got sent to ISS. I wasn't wrong. They were totally wrong, but I was wrong about how I handled the situation, especially as the adult, the person that's supposed to be the responsible one. So what kind of strategies could you give someone? I mean, just maybe one or two. We don't want to give away all your stuff because I know this is your
Okay.
business,
Okay.
but one or two things that you can do right off the bat when conflict starts to happen.
Yeah. I mean, this, what I'm willing to give away for free, I'll share because, I have a free PDF you can download from my website, and we can officially plug that later. But so this is information I would have given away anyway. So happy to do that.
Excellent, Jerry. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the two things that I like to say, right, and if you don't have courage, use curiosity instead, right? And so kind of like to overlay your situation to say, hey, can you I just need to verify that what I heard is what I heard. Can you tell me a little more, and can you tell me why you said that? It's like, well, no, what, you're just trying to. Here's the thing, right? People will listen to interrupt, and that is the worst mistake they can make, right? Because the wise move is, let me listen to everything they have to say without interrupting, because the more complete a picture that they're painting for me, now I know how I need to actually respond, right? Instead of, oh, well, no, you're not getting this. And it's like, nope, now you're just going to escalate the situation. So that's what I would say. Hey, like, be genuinely curious about that whole thing, right? And then the other is, to say, okay, like, well, here's one of my fun phrases that I use. I wouldn't be having this conversation with you unless I felt like you could handle it. So it's a compliment. It's a compliment, even as you're challenging them, right? And here's the thing, guys, asterisk with that one. If you don't mean it, it's gonna fail. Like, if you're just saying this to say, this is how I get people to do what I want. You're like, let me know how that works out for you, right? But to say, hey, look, I know what you're capable of, and I'm sad that you're settling for less. Right, and you can say that without, and it's not to make you feel guilty or shame them. It's just to say there's a healthy amount of conviction that you can give somebody to say, hey, look, I know what you gave, I know what you can do, and I don't know why you don't want to fulfill that potential, right? And so those are some of the things that come to mind to say, hey, in this situation, how can we handle it a little differently to maybe get the person to see things a little differently. And I'll give a counterexample just for the same thing, right? So at this conference that I was helping out at, we had this group text where people, the students are going around and being like, hey, we're meeting here tonight, let's da. And there's a time for students to plug their chapters in this organization. And at one point, one student writes, I'm not gay, but $20 is $20. And the next morning, The executive director and one who's running this meeting comes into this and talks to all the facilitators, which I was one, and he was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to pull her aside and send her home. Like, that's just unacceptable. And even worse was when some of the facilitators just like, I still think that's too kind. And I was like, wait a second, guys, but can we just back up for a second?
Yeah.
Because we're teaching, like, there's a leadership conference, so we're teaching curiosity, we're teaching integrity, we're teaching not just integrity moral wise, but structurally and relational integrity. You know, what if you took the person who made the offending statement and like had her address the students who were offended by that statement?
Yes.
You know,
it's a teaching moment now.
Yeah,
we can use this.
Yeah, like, if you send her home, you're basically like saying that everything we're teaching you this week doesn't matter because you stepped over this secret line, and we all know that's unacceptable. And the only way to get you to think about what you're doing is to just cut you off from all this useful material, instead of saying, okay, if we're teaching this material, how can we address the situation that's consistent with what we're teaching you, right? Because, you know, like you said, right, you're just like, well, you know, I was right and justified, but I felt like, you know, my message didn't go across poorly, or maybe they won't take away the lessons I hope that they would learn from this. And so, yeah, again, we don't have to keep making that mistake, right? Maybe
what happened with that student?
Oh, they didn't tell me. It was kind of like, it was just like, and I told them, I was just like, look, executive director, you don't owe me an explanation. You're running this meeting. You run how you feel like you need to. If you still feel like, well, Jerry, that's a nice idea, and I'm still going to send her home, you know, just get off my back. I'm not going to take that personal, right? I am sad if that's what they ended up doing, but again, you know, I also know my place to be like, no, man, you got to fight for this. It's like, okay, well, this is still
like, not this fight. This is not the one.
No, I mean, I stuck up for it, but again, I knew it was also his decision, so he could easily just override me, and I wasn't going to be like, no, because who am I going to go? Like, there's no one he answers to, and definitely not me. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's where you got to choose your battles. There's also a time and a place. You have to know your position. I mean, my sister was talking about this, and I think I talked about it on another episode, where you go, this is not really the battle that I can fight. And I'm not the boss here. I can make suggestions if there is an avenue to do that, but otherwise you just got to kind of fall in line. If it's not egregious enough and this situation it doesn't involve you in that way. So you go, hey, maybe we could do this, but, you know, you guys can do whatever you want.
Yeah. So, and that's a case by case thing, right? It's you know, we're here to say, okay, if there's gonna be physical violence involved, yeah, probably not the best time to stand up for that. Wait until you're in a safe space, and then around advocates, and make sure that either you meet in a neutral place, or, you know, it's daytime, things like that, right, where things are less likely to happen. Make sure, the environment is very civil and things like that. And at the same time, right, you're just like, okay, no, like, you know, I've stretched you as far as I can. And, you know, if we're just not going to talk about this anymore in order to just be civil with the relationship, sure, we'll call a truce, and, you know, that's it. And, you know, yeah, what's it worth to you, right? Is this a relationship worth staying in, even if it drives you nuts sometimes? Yeah, okay. You know, other times it's just like, you know what, this friendship, I feel like they're dragging me down, and I've given them feedback and like how we can stop, and they're still not being receptive. Okay, maybe it just needs to stop. So, yeah.
And when talking about relationships, there's always, I mean, there's levels to it, right? I don't believe in cutting people off most of the time. I typically feel like at the very least, I can call you every once in a while and just say, hello, you know, doing all right? Okay, cool, excellent. I'm glad you're still alive. And I'll call you next year on your birthday.
Yeah.
Because I always feel like when these people do start to have these realizations, right, when they do want to get better, they need to have somebody around that they can talk to, that they can bounce ideas off of. And if you've completely cut these people off, then now where do they go to get that?
Yeah, fair.
And so, yeah, I can't talk to you every day. I can't talk to you every week. I can't even talk to you every month, but I can call you every once in a while, just to make sure that you're okay, just to kind of check and see where you are. And then, you know, we'll kind of see what happens going down the road. But in relationships, man, it's so fluid. We're always growing and learning, and sometimes getting better and sometimes getting worse, depending on, where you are in life.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had a relationship that you had to just like say, you know what, this isn't really working. I'm trying all my conflict resolution stuff. They don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And I just got to move on without them. Have you had any relationships? Like, I mean, we all have, but have you any that you can share?
Sure. I mean, the most poignant and toughest example is when I had to evict a roommate, actually. That was really hard. Because rarely, I mean, and again, people can say, well, Jerry, you're a hypocrite if you, because there are times when I just move on and just like, I don't know him, I don't owe him a goodbye, use my time how I want. And, there were some people that were like that. They were just like, they just want to feel sorry for themselves because it's like God didn't give them a wife by the time that they were 30. And you just like, okay, this isn't helpful. So I just need to let that drift. And, again, sometimes that's the best thing because you don't necessarily need to go to the extent of let's meet over coffee. I'm breaking up with you. Sorry. Like that's like, that's you want. Ideally, you give that courtesy, but if not, no one's going to call you on it. You're not going to get arrested or anything like that. Oh, you're a terrible person. It's like, yeah.
I've been ghosted before, for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's one thing to ghost if you like set something up and then stop. It's another if you just like I'm just going to stop calling this person. No one, you don't have to announce to them, oh, by the way, I'm going to stop calling you. Like, I'm going to block your number.
By the way, we're done. Bye. So don't expect any more calls.
Yeah. Throw that grenade over your shoulder. See ya. No, so this guy, it was hard because, when he first moved in, he was a good roommate. Like he was a flight attendant, so his checks came in at a weird rhythm, but they cleared. And so, that was fine. But then he went through a weird job transition and then just the checks started getting late or they bounced. And I was like, okay, like this, he was living month to month. And so when I got a new roommate, I was like, okay, like if anyone moving forward who's living here has to sign a lease. And then, he defaulted on his lease. And that was hard because I know like the day that he officially defaulted, went 2 months without rent. And I was just like, oh, And then he just basically kind of stayed in his room until dared me to actually enforce the terms of the lease. Because at one point I told him, okay, you can't use the garage anymore. And then he's like, oh, they told my other room. He's like, oh, I'm so thankful Jerry hasn't done anything else. Like I can do this. And I'm just like, he knows. Like he knows. And, then my friends had to remind me, they're just like, Jerry, look, like if he's in violation of his lease, you have the authority to call the cops and have him escorted off your property for trespassing. I was like, okay, well, let's do an ultimatum, say, okay, this is what's going to take. And then, he begged for a 7-day extension and then, still didn't happen. And then he's like, I guess he felt like as long as Jerry wants the money, as long as I give him vague promises about how hard I'm trying, like surely he'll keep giving me rope. And at one point I just basically said, okay, you know what? It's not worth it anymore. I've given you every extension you've asked for. You still haven't shown anything. So if you do get money, like you say you're working on, please use it towards your next place of residence. And only then did he say, you know what, I have no leverage anymore. So that's when we started moving out. And it was hard because the last day when he finally moved everything out, he's just like, here's the keys, hope I make you proud of me again. I was like, in my mind, I'm like, that's cute. Get out.
Yeah, get out. We're done. It doesn't matter what you say now.
Yeah.
No matter what clips or witty things, we're done. We're done. It's over.
Yeah. Like and it was hard because it was just like I wanted to say, pay me back the money you owe me, and maybe I'll take you seriously, right? And you have to, if I'm going to set myself apart from other people who have fired me or been in situations like that, it's just like, okay, let me show him dignity even if I don't think he deserves it, and just say, hey, okay, well, thanks and goodbye, right? No one needs cheap shots. Like we like them and we love them in movies and stuff, but there's a reason they're in movies and not in real life. So yeah, show this guy some grace because grace is always unfair until you need some. And I got that from Pop Golf, guys. I'm not that profound, but that's the idea, right? It's like, okay, even in hard situations, how can I show grace and dignity to this person, even if especially, it's not about whether they deserve it. It's just, hey, it's a tough situation. Let's move on. Goodbye. That's it.
But at some point, grace runs out, right?
Yeah.
You got to pay the piper. Human.
Yeah. And that's part of it. It's just, hey, let me show him grace as I show him the way out, right? It's just, hey, I'm not going to be snide or insulting to you. Just, our time has run up. Yeah. Stop.
There've been tons of There's been a lot of grace, I'll
Mm-hmm.
say, over the past few years with everything that's happened, with
Mm-hmm.
people and mental health and all of this stuff. But like you
Yeah.
said, like when you talk to your buddies and you start to realize and they just tell you like, dude, this guy's taking advantage of you. He's taking advantage of all that grace that you're giving. You gotta know like where the line is. Again, I can reference teachers where you go, well, you give that extension, you push the deadline, but at some point, hey, it's due. I got to get my grades in. Report cards got to come out. I can't continue to extend everything and push back on my deadline. So, hey, man, grace is awesome, but it's definitely got to run out at some point if we want to continue to make the world go round at a reasonable pace. So enough with all of that hard stuff, conflict, and how things can be difficult. Our next number here is the 1900s. You know what's coming, Jerry. So salsa, the dance moves, originated in Latin America and has evolved over time with influences from cultures such as Cuba, Los Angeles, New York, and Puerto Rico. I don't know if you all know this, but Mr. Fu here is an exquisite salsa dancer. So, Jerry, talk about how you got into salsa and all of the other creative things you do.
Oh man, it's such a beautiful story because it's it's a hobby I never would have picked for myself, but it's just such consumed my life now. And in the same way, this parallel, this leadership development, where before I just said, oh, I'll never be good at it. And then, the blessing is that sometimes you just don't know when to quit. And the more you keep doing something, all of a sudden you're like, I actually went through the first 6 months and actually kind of got good at this. And so, so at my freshman year at Rice, they had a salsa social. The teachers were terrible. So that doesn't help, right? Like if you have bad teachers, you're going to think you're terrible at something and then you never want to touch it again. So shout out to good teachers. And, I left it alone until I got to pharmacy school. And then my friends who were multicultural were like, you got to give another chance. And by now, my third year in school, I said, my grades are solidified to a point where I can spend a couple nights out and not worry about losing my grades too much. So let me take some real lessons. Got better at it and started to get to a point where I could actually enjoy it. Right as I got good at it, where I felt alive dancing, I graduated and moved to a city that had no salsa dancing. So, living in Knoxville for a couple of years, and I just went dormant, got rusty, lacked confidence, but I missed it. And so it's just really unproductive cycle. I moved back to Houston 12 years ago, and all my initial friends are into two-stepping. So, okay, I guess I'm going to learn how to country dance, which is a wonderful detour. But I tell people, they're like, well, so what got you back into salsa dancing? I'm just like, well, I go to socials here and there. There'll be glimpses of what I was capable of. But I tell people, 2014, a Venezuelan friend invites me to a free salsa dancing event at the downtown aquarium. And I'm being very specific because Tony knows the city, so he knows what I'm talking about. And goes to downtown aquarium on Bagby. And I kid you not, Tony, one skilled, pretty blonde. And I'm like, I got to dance with her. I'm going to bring my A game. I'm in flow. I'm losing track of time. I am unlocking all these moves I forgot that I had. I finished the dance and I just say, oh my gosh, why did I stay away from this for so long? And then I'm like, all right, I'm back. And then, don't get me wrong. Convincing Hispanic women I actually know what I'm doing, it's going to be an uphill battle for the rest of my life. But for the ones that do give me a chance, and there are fun strategies to increase your chances of a yes. And once they've seen you dance, they're like, okay, maybe this guy actually knows what he's doing. But it's just such a great journey because along that same path, when I moved out of the house from where my family was, all of a sudden I had to cook for myself because my mom used to cook for me and she said, you should learn how to cook. And I said, yeah, I should learn how to cook. And then I'll go watch TV and not do it. And so it wasn't until you have to put yourself in that environment where you have to grow, right? It's like I see my friends trying to teach their kids foreign languages and they keep responding in English. And they're just like, just ship them to Mexico for 6 months and make them grow because unless they are forced to speak Spanish in order to get their point across, they're going to default to English because we are always going to default to what's comfortable. So also cooking and dancing and music. I've my parents were kind enough to spend a lot of money on piano lessons growing up, but I didn't appreciate it. But until I figured out songs by ear, like Bohemian Rhapsody or Casey and JoJo, All of a sudden now I'm playing because I like to play, and not because my parents are like, we got to make our kid awesome and show us that we're awesome parents because we made our kid smart and talented, you know?
Man, I spent some time in China teaching English for a year.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And those are the stories that I would hear from kids. Like, they would go to school, and then after school, they would have like 3 or 4 more hours of just either going to English classes or piano classes or dance lessons or violin. There was always something. And then the adults, like the people that I worked with, they would go, our parents, they just want to like show us off. Like, hey, look how awesome my kid is. I'm like, oh man. I mean, we do the same stuff in America, you know, in the Black homes, you know, we compare brothers and sisters and cousins. So-and-so is doing this, so-and-so is doing that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of sucks just for the kids. But sometimes you get older and you go, dang, I'm glad I did, you know, take piano, learn how to cook or whatever it was. So what's your favorite thing to play?
Like instruments or
instrument? And then I know you talked about piano. Do you play other things too?
So I grew up playing piano and violin. I got too tall for my violin, so that stopped. And then I picked up like basic rhythm acoustic guitar in college. Some friends were kind enough to teach me, and so I can do some basic chords. And so the funny thing with like, you learn 4 or 5 chords, which all pop songs use, and all of a sudden you think you're God because you're like, oh my gosh, I can sing this and that and this. And so mainly I focus on piano and guitar now. Like if I'm leading worship for church or something, or you know, if someone has a piano at their house and you know it's a party and it's like it's fun to play name that tune. At one point, a friend of mine encouraged me to try to get into wedding gigs, but I haven't focused my business on that yet. So we'll see.
Man, like you said, you have to continue to practice those things though. Or you can get rusty. Like if I were to pick this thing up right now, oh man, I'm so rusty because I spent this entire summer just pouring all of my time into my podcast.
Yeah.
But before the last couple of summers, man, my summer will be I'd be playing, you know, every morning out. That's how I wake up, and you know, my worship songs and all that stuff. And I try to figure out where the chords were and where the notes and all that great stuff. But man, you gotta keep playing, or it's kind of tough. So do you use like piano and salsa dance? Do you use these outlets as de-stressors? I know mental health is a huge thing right now. So how do those things play into that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, more so salsa dancing than music. That was a tough thing to admit about myself, where if you asked me to choose between music and salsa dancing, I'm like salsa dancing pretty much every time. Maybe I'll break script and do music every once in a while. That's why I will sign up to do worship stuff, because I know it forces me from keeping it forces me to stay kind of sharp on it. But yeah, like salsa dancing, like when the pandemic hit and all the dancing had to put on hold, I was at a breaking point. And when I heard like underground movement was starting to happen, I'm like, I'm gonna go. And they're like, are you crazy? I'm just like, this is the need is greater for mental health as opposed to physical health at this point. And I mean, again, I'm not trying to be a role model for anybody in this case. It's just, you know, like if you know, your body will tell you what it needs. And if your body needs to say, hey, you know, because I had a roommate, you know, at one point, it was funny when the pandemic hit, and he's just like, COVID's not that bad, I want to go to church. And I'm just like, are you listening to yourself? But I mean, I couldn't fault his need for community, right? We all wanted this connection. That Zoom is a nice substitute, but it's not, or it's a supplement, but not an adequate substitute. And so, I mean, dancing, oh God, like I almost have to date or marry another dancer, because as soon if I date someone who won't let me go dancing, I'm like, no, I shouldn't marry you. So.
That's what my dad did. He really got into like doing hustles and 2-steps, and this is in Detroit.
Nice.
And so he met his now wife doing all those same things. So it's not like, oh, I'm going out dancing and she's opposed. They're going out dancing together. So
beautiful.
Before we wrap this up, Jerry, and this has been an amazing interview, I want to ask you my 3 whats that I ask every guest that I have on. All right, so the first one is, what's an opinion inside or outside of your field
Mhm.
that will be considered unpopular?
Get vaccinated, all of you.
All right, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Next, what? If you weren't in pharmacy or doing your leadership stuff
Mhm.
with your wonderful website, what field would you be in?
Man, yeah, I did this exercise as part of a designing your life, Odyssey thing, for those of you familiar with that. But yeah, they ask you to choose 3 different professions and then research them. And so I said, yeah, you know what? I would love to open up a dance studio actually and just be a dance instructor and just do that. I think it's just fun.
That's where the passion is. You might as well go for it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, last one.
Mhm.
And I think you are more than qualified to speak to this one. Is what advice would you give to someone in high school? So if I were to take this part of our episode back to my classroom, what would you be able to say, Jerry, to my students ages 9th grade to 12th grade, all
Oh,
crazy teenagers?
oh man. Yeah, that's oh no, I love this. Um, Evaluate what your current plans are leading you toward and ask why you would be happy with that.
Mm,
Because like what was the trajectory of my life based on Asian definitions of success? Get married, have a career, have some kids in this, and live in the suburbs, start a family, have a career, right? And to what end? So your kids can get married, start a family, have a career. And to what end? So that their kids can go to school, have a career, start a family. And it's like, okay, what if there is a better, I mean, if you want that, sure, I'm not here to
yeah.
judge. And at the same time, when the reasons for wanting that are, fewer and far between now, what do you want to do instead? Right. So that's what I would love to have that conversation with them, just to see what they would say. Because, right, you have Barack Obama being like, Black people need to aspire to more than being ballers and rappers, right? And it's like, okay, well, when the president says that, geez. Things like that, right? I think, yeah, just evaluating your definition of success and, what would make it meaningful for you, and to realize, your parents mean well for you. They want you to have stability and a nice, reliable job, and that's great. And, what if there was more to life than the stability they wanted for you?
100% challenge it again, like you said, challenge the ideas. Okay, that's what you want. Why is that? Have you even asked yourself why? Or is that something that you heard from your parents, you heard from your grandparents, your cousins, aunt, uncles, that kind of thing? So Jerry, before we leave, I want you to tell people, where can they find you? Where can they find your services, social media, website, business? Push it all out there for the listeners.
Sure. Yeah, check out the free guide you can download with the framework on how to handle difficult conversations. Go to www.adaptingleaders.com/guide. Otherwise, the website, adaptingleaders.com, you can schedule a complimentary 30-minute call. Tell me what you're working on. Check out the free blog where I share, other podcasts or life hacks or, summaries of interesting leadership literature. And yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, but really the best place to go for all the goodies, even if you never hire me, is www.adaptingleaders.com.
All right, everyone. I think that's it. I mean, that was amazing. You gave so much great insight into your life and the things that you do, and also salsa dancing. So everybody get out there and try something, have fun. Ask yourself why. So signing off for Jerry Fu, also known as J Fu. I really like that nickname. I am your host, Tony Rambles. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, download, follow, all of that great stuff. And I will see you all in the next Ramble.